following program is brought to you by the League of Women Voters, Oakland area. The League of Women Voters is a national, nonpartisan organization established to encourage citizen participation in government. It never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. The statements and opinions of the candidates are presented in the interest of public service and in no way are to be construed as endorsement thereof by the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters takes no responsibility for any of the views or facts stated by the candidates.
Good evening, and welcome to this forum featuring the candidates seeking the 14th U.S. Congressional District. I am Jerry Burden, President of the League of Women Voters, Oakland area. I do not reside in the 14th District. The sponsors of this forum are the League of Women Voters, Oakland area. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization. Our members do the hands-on work to safeguard democracy. We are directly involved in shaping important issues to keep our community strong. If you're interested in learning about the League, you can help us with our mission. I encourage you to pick up some of our information here tonight or visit our website, www.lwvoa. Tonight's forum will be moderated by Carla Gibbs. Carla Brisboy Gribbs is the regional manager of Detroit Energy. She's a resident of the city of Rochester, has long time been involved in the environment, government, and politics. She is a League of Women Voters member, and she is here tonight to moderate this forum, introduce the candidates and the panel members. Carla Gribbs.
Thank you, Jerry, and good evening.
Good evening.
As Jerry said, we are here for the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the U.S. Congressional House of Representatives, District 14. Tonight is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters Oakland area and the League of Women Voters Grosse Pointe. And welcome to our venue, Oakland Community College, here in the city of Farmington Hills. Just like to take a reminder and ask everyone to turn off, turn down their electronic cell phones. Everybody's going into their pockets, as we would not like to be interrupted during this wonderful debate. You know, voting is perhaps the most important right that we have in the United States, and the League of Women Voters is pleased to present the opportunity to inform you about your choices coming up for August 5th primary election so that you can spend your vote wisely. And I'm pleased to see that we have a good number gathered here of interested individuals, and I know those of you that are watching us at home will enjoy tonight's event. The League of Women Voters has prepared a voter's guide for the upcoming election, as was mentioned, that it is available on the following website. It's called 411.org, 411.org. That is for national and state races only. Again, all the candidates tonight will appear on the primary election ballot on Tuesday, August 5th. The candidate who ultimately gets elected to the U.S. House of Representatives for the 14th District will receive a 2-year term with an annual salary of $174,000. The 14th District includes the following communities in Oakland County: Pontiac, Sylvan Lake, Keego Harbor, Orchard Lake, parts of West Bloomfield Township, Farmington Hills, Southfield, Lathrop Village, Oak Park, and Royal Oak Township, as well as the following communities in Wayne County: half of Detroit, the Grosse Pointes, Hamtramck, and Harper Woods. The U.S. House of Representatives does share the responsibility with the U.S. Senate to enact new federal laws and amend or repeal existing federal laws. During the primary, it's important for you as voters to remember that you can cast only a vote in one party. In the Republican Party, Christine Conyers is running unopposed and will not be here tonight. In the Democratic Party, there are 4 people appearing on the ballot, and that is who we have as guests tonight: Hanson Clark, Burgess Foster, Rudy Hobbs, and Brenda Lawrence. The winner of the Democratic Party in August will advance to the general election along with the Republican candidate in November. And I don't want to imply that Christine Conyers was to be originally part of this program. She was not. The forum for tonight's debate will include alternating questions from 3 very distinguished panelists to my left. First, Nolan Finley, who is the editorial page editor of the Detroit News. Mr. Finley is an award-winning leader in our state and a recent inductee to the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. Additionally, next to him is Brian Dickerson, columnist for the Detroit Free Press, and as well as an editor of the Detroit Free Press. He is also a member of their editorial board and has been hanging out his hat there for about 26 years. Third, we have a professor from Wayne State University. Tim Bledsoe is a political science professor and former state representative from the eastern side of Wayne County. So thank you very much, panelists, for joining us here and agreeing to help us out tonight. So let's get started. The candidates have drawn for the order of speaking and will introduce themselves with a brief 1-minute statement. Following the opening statement, the candidates will respond to questions from our panelists, and each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to any of the questions. Rebuttal answers will be allowed. However, a reminder is a rebuttal against something that was said by someone else being asked the same question. It is not a continuation of what you had said or a repeat of what had been said earlier. Responses to questions will be strictly timed, and candidates will limit their answers to 1.5 minutes. Rebuttals can take up to 30 seconds. Our timer tonight in the center of the auditorium is Steve Trowbridge. And questions and responses tonight may only address issues that pertain to the position of U.S. Representative. We, of course, will not allow or tolerate any personal attacks. And we do ask the audience to hold all applause and comments until the conclusion of the program. We will now begin the opening statements with candidates competing for the U.S. House of Representatives seat in District 14, and we see we have a full table. So, picking the number 1, we will start with the Honorable Brenda Lawrence, Mayor of the City of Southfield. Ms. Lawrence.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm excited to be on the ballot as a candidate for the 14th Congressional District. I'm running with the enthusiasm and the mission to serve. I have been in politics now for 20 years on city council, school board, and as mayor, my 4th term. I'm excited to take that experience that I have gained during this period of time to connect the dots between the federal government and local government. I will tell you that we need a voice in Congress that's going to fight for the issues that are important: gun control, women's rights, minimum wage, jobs, and also to fight for the right for us as a district to have the federal resources that we need for mass transit to make sure that this district moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we will have the Honorable Rudy Hobbs, member of the Michigan State House of Representatives for the 35th Legislative District. Mr. Hobbs.
Good evening. I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate. It is absolutely critical to our process, our election process. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we're going to be asking very specific questions that are very important to our region. It's going to be up to you to determine who actually answers those questions, who demonstrates the vast knowledge of those issues, who has demonstrated a proven track record, of leadership and success in this region, making them qualified to be your congressman. I humbly submit to you that I am that candidate. I've been a leader in every position I've held at the local, state, and federal level. Honestly, none of my opponents can say that. I've decided to run for Congress. Until I decided to run for Congress, I was the highest ranking African American in this state. I was the number 2 Democrat in our Democratic caucus. My colleagues voted me to that place because they knew my commitment to the work necessary to effectuate change. Because I've demonstrated the young, energetic leadership and fresh ideas that is needed for this district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Mr. Hanson Clark. Mr. Clark.
Who I am as a person is important to how I'll represent you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters. After my father died, who was an immigrant from India, he died when I was 8 years old, I was raised by a single mother who had to work minimum wage jobs, cleaning toilets, cleaning floors, in order to support me. I saw her sacrifice and her struggle. When she passed away when I was 19, I dropped out of school. I lost my income. I gave up hope, but I was able to get a second chance in life, not only through education, but later on by meeting my wife, Choi, who was not from here. She spent the first 3 years of her life living in a Korean orphanage and was later adopted by a loving Jewish family. Her father was David Cohen from Oakland County. She and I value the opportunities that this country provides, but yet many families and businesses are stressed. That's why I ask you to return me to Congress so we can get Congress working again for our people. I was able to do it then, I can do it now. I will fight to make sure everyone has a fair opportunity to live the American dream again.
Thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Mr. Burgess Foster. Mr. Foster.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm the only teacher in the race, and I have somewhat of a slogan that's become quite popular as I go from place to place, and it's, I'm ready to teach the Republicans a lesson. I mean, seriously, since 2009, I have been ensconced in everything that's been going on in the city of Detroit in particular. Charter commission meetings, school board meetings. As a matter of fact, I'm the only person up here who can say that they were at a charter commission meeting, a school board meeting, the city council meetings, well before it became an opportunity to run for the United States representative. I've been in the throes of public questions trying to answer those. Currently, I'm a school teacher. I have a master's degree in management. I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I'm excited about providing oversight that has not been conspicuous, to say the least.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've heard from the candidates, their opening statements. We'll now start the questioning with Brian Dickerson from the Detroit Free Press.
And to whom should I address my first?
It can be to anyone you would like or all of the candidates.
Okay, I'll start at the far end with Mayor Lawrence.
Could you bring that microphone, sorry, just a little closer? Thank you.
Mayor Lawrence, veteran lawmakers in both parties routinely describe Congress as a place where relations between members are no longer collegial, where fundraising is a round-the-clock chore, where partisan gridlock prevents either party from accomplishing much of any consequence. What makes you believe that your experience as a member of the minority party in the House would be any different?
I'm excited about going to Washington because, you know, I'm a mayor, and as a mayor, when you have, and you can relate to this, when there's a pothole that doesn't have an R or a D on it, it needs to be fixed. And I need to find the resources, and I'm held accountable for the results that I bring in my position of elected office. So to say that a Republican has an ideal or a Democrat has an ideal, I work for the people, and I really understand that. So I have been groomed. I haven't been tainted by a legislative weak, being in a position not of leadership. I don't have that. I have lobbied Congress, I've lobbied the State House on both sides to get the resources that I need to take care of my city. And there's like 5 other mayors. We're gonna form a mayor's caucus, and we're gonna bring that mentality of bringing people together to make sure that when we go home to our constituents, that we are actually taking care of their needs and working toward that. So I'm excited about the opportunity.
Thank you. Why don't we go right down? Was that question, I'm sorry, for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Hobbs.
That's a great question, and my answer to that question is I've done it as a state legislator. You know, I'm proud of my time in the state legislature. I don't see it as a taint on my record. I see it as a way for me to have the experience to actually go to Washington, D.C. and actually get something accomplished. You know, I was the Democratic floor leader. It was my job every Tuesday to sit down with the Republican floor leader to put the agenda together for the week. It was my job to make sure that we had the votes to put up Medicaid, that we pushed minimum wage. You know, I've served in a legislature that was majority Republican. The Republicans held the majority, and we were still able to get things done under my leadership as a Democratic floor leader. I'm very proud of that time that I've spent in Lansing, and it has prepared me, not only for just testifying in front of committees, but it has prepared me to go there and actually get some things done and work in a bipartisan fashion way to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Yes, I've worked in Congress. I've been able to get legislation through the Republican-controlled Congress, even though I was a freshman at the time and even though I was a Democrat. Let me tell you, here's how I did it. I worked based on what we all had in common as members of Congress, the common needs of our community, to have safer neighborhoods. That's how I was able to get an increase in funding for Homeland Securities. Even though the Congress was trying to cut programs to help families, I was able to increase by millions of dollars funding for women, infants, and children. I was also able to work directly with the administration to improve the Affordable Care Act while the Congress was trying to repeal it. Furthermore, when the administration refused to fund light rail in Detroit, which could be the start of a regional transit system, I said, no, you must reconsider it, and they did, and they funded that. So ultimately, the way to change the system is to engage the public. I was able to engage over 1 million citizens around the country to support my legislation to cut student loan debt. So finally, if you choose me to return to Congress, I know I'll be able to get bipartisan support on cutting all these unnecessary conflicting government regulations that tie our family and businesses in red tape so we can then stimulate our economy and create new jobs. I've done the job before. I ask you to hire me again so I can work for you.
Thank you. Mr. Foster?
Brian Dickerson, the question about can an individual be affable? Are they a dogmatic Democrat? I think a lot of individuals are dogmatic when they go to Washington, D.C. I support my president, but I am willing to break from my party and go across the aisle myself, no matter what my party thinks, because we need to exert leadership. You send someone to Lansing to go out and become a deal maker, if you will. And that's what I am. I'm a deal maker. I plan on, in my first 2 years, to open up a third office in Oakland County, which has never been done by a congressional representative from the city of Detroit, is to open up a third office in the in an outlying suburbs, in the periphery. Because we want individuals to know that who might be out in West Bloomfield or Pontiac, you don't have to always drive downtown to the federal building just to come and get some service. So I believe that there is a veneer of respectability, but I plan on being very affable and co-sponsoring legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question goes to Nolan Finley.
Yes, thank you. Detroit makes up a significant piece of this oddly drawn district. The current congressman fought against the emergency management, the appointment of emergency manager and the process that brought Detroit to where it is today. Would you have opposed that process? Do you still oppose it? And let's start with Mr. Hobbs.
Excellent. Very good question. Yes, I do oppose emergency manager, and I'll tell you why. We voters went to the polls, voted down the emergency manager law. You know, our Republican legislator brought a different version of that law back to the legislature, put in an appropriations so that voters could no longer overturn what the legislator put in place. So yes, I do oppose it, because at the core of the law, it takes away democracy. And we can never silence people's voices. When people go to the polls and elect those individuals, those are the people they have chosen. That is their right. And I don't believe in taking the right away from people to vote. And that's why I oppose the emergency manager in the city of Detroit.
This question is for everyone.
Well, anyone who wants to answer.
Yeah.
Let me jump in. It's a hard
yes,
question,
Mr. Foster.
and I'm not going to dodge it. I believe that the city of Detroit has been mismanaged for about a dozen years, and no one has said anything about it. There was no recalls for Kwame Kilpatrick, as I recall, no pun intended. There was There was no outcry, if you will, by the public when their schools were circling the drain. So I am not for the current or the former law that described the emergency financial manager's duties, but I am for someone making hard choices, not to borrow from Hillary Clinton, but I believe someone needs to make some hard choices. And if that means file for bankruptcy on your own before you need an emergency financial manager, then that's what should have been done. Because now we wait, bailout's gone, and they're crying about it when they could have cut their own grass, charged $5 themselves. I don't believe in standing at the public trial and getting just funds. I believe we need to make fiduciary, sound decisions, and we need to be responsible. And then we wouldn't need an emergency financial manager.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, would you like to address this?
Yes, I do. First of all, we did need a change in political culture in Detroit. That is why time and time again, I ran against the political system of the city that I was born and raised in, that I still live in on the Lower East Side. I also want to tell you that the emergency manager and bankruptcy was unnecessary in the city of Detroit. I worked as valiantly as I could in Congress toward the end of 2012, knowing that my time was limited. I was able to pull together a coalition of members of Congress from the Congressional Black Caucus, also including some of the most conservative members of the House, to actually support legislation that would drive investment, public and private, back to the city of Detroit. But there were elements in the city that refused to request that money. At times, even the money that I had asked for, that I was able to secure, the city refused to take it. So I just want to share that with you. We now have a new day. I have full confidence in the new mayor. He'll be able to handle the money properly. That'll make my job much easier if you return me to Congress to be able to get grant dollars. But Detroit is important because it's a part of this region. This region is important to this country because it is still the brand for U.S. manufacturing. What Detroit needs is what we need throughout southeastern Michigan. We need to be able to attract more families and businesses. The way we do that is by improving our quality of life with good schools, great training, and reliable transit system, and addressing the root cause of crime, which is dropout and illiteracy and drug abuse. I have programs that I have implemented in Detroit to actually address those issues, and I'll talk to you about them throughout this program.
Thank you. Ms. Lawrence?
Yes, the emergency manager situation that happened. This is another time I want you to look at my experience. I had one of the toughest challenges as a city, being hit one of the hardest with foreclosure, property values dropping by 40%. And this is where experience comes in. I know I do not support the emergency manager and the contents and the way it is being administered now because it attacks the voting right. I am in my city, I have the right to elect my elected officials. Those who are under emergency manager in Michigan, they lose their right to vote for those who they will handle their tax dollars. That part I do not support. However, look at the experience that I've had in a tough economy to balance the budget, to reduce my staff by 25%, never laying off a single person. But the way that I was able to do that was using federal dollars in the city of Southfield for cops, for SAFER, for firefighters, using it for neighborhood stabilization to fight blight when we had the foreclosures. We in this district have 4 communities that's either undergoing in or coming out of an emergency manager. Leadership is needed that have experience, that will be able to direct and help those cities through these tough economic times, including Detroit, who just recently botched Head Start money. Those are federal dollars, and that's unacceptable. And having the experience to navigate these cities and these leaders through that process will add value.
May I
Thank
rebuttal?
you.
May I have a
yes,
rebuttal?
actually, Mr. Hobbs for the first rebuttal and Mr. Foster for the second
Can I get 2
rebuttal.
rebuttals?
You have a chance to have 1 rebuttal for 30 seconds.
All right, I'll take my 1 rebuttal, and I want to rebut something that that my opponent has said, that during tough economic times, that they have, been able to save jobs and not fire or get rid of or shrink a staff. Well, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that in the city of Southfield, where I live, we have a strong council type of government. The city manager has authority to hire and fire, not the mayor of Sawfield. The mayor of Sawfield is a ceremonial position, and they don't have the opportunity to hire and fire. So I just wanted to make sure that we're very clear.
Thank you. Mr. Hobbs.
Well, I don't
I'm
know-
sorry, not Mr. Hobbs, sorry. Burgess Foster.
I don't know if Mr. House is looking down here at my notes or not, but I did scribble something about the city manager, but I have more. The City of Detroit's emergency financial manager could be utilizing, Nolan, his powers more creatively. For example, you have Highland Park that's also in emergency financial management in Detroit. Yet Detroit has about 14 bus lines that services Highland Park, and we don't get a dime for picking up anybody from Highland Park or Hamtramck. Not one iota of one scintilla. And so I think we need to find more shared services in the region.
Thank you. Brenda Lawrence.
Yes, I guess I have to give a civics lesson tonight. The city of Southfield is the only city in the state of Michigan that has a hybrid form of management. It's a mix between a strong mayor and what some people call city manager. I have veto power, as a strong mayor does. I have appointment powers. I present the budget, and I present the budget through the city administrator. I have powers of appointment, and every single contract has to be signed by me. I am at the table with every single negotiation, and I do have powers, contrary to what my opponent has said.
Thank you. Tim Bledsoe, the next question, and who is it for?
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Clark, but I'd like all the panel, all the candidates to answer it. You know, one of the opportunities that you'll have when you go to Washington as a successful candidate, as a Congress member, is to amend the United States Constitution, or to begin the process of amending the Constitution. It's a very arduous process. We only do it about once every generation or two, requiring a supermajority in both chambers and then ratification by the states. But you could potentially initiate that process of amending the Constitution of the United States. With that opportunity, what, if anything, would you do?
I would amend the Constitution of the United States. You know why I do it? Because I had to see my mother struggle every day working these minimum wage jobs. Not only she got low pay, she got low respect. People would snicker at her when she would come in the classroom with her crossing guard uniform on, because that's what she did for a living. And then she worked cleaning floors and toilets. But that's how I was able to go to college. She saved up money to send me to prep school, so I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. And I graduated from Cornell University because of that. I say this because I never was able to thank her. She died when I was 19, and I was a typical ungrateful teenager. What I would do, without a doubt, is what I did in Washington when I was in Congress, is I co-sponsored a resolution to make it easier to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. We have got to grant women the same equal rights under law as everyone else in this country. That's the start. That's the very minimum. And what I'll do is I'll continue to work, as I did in Congress, to make sure that we address the gender gap in wage. That's why I co-sponsored the Paycheck Fairness Act, the gender gap in manufacturing, those high-paid jobs. That's why I brought training dollars here to Detroit to actually train people who otherwise wouldn't get the training to get into these high-paid jobs. And one thing my mother used to tell me, she said, son, I can't afford to get sick because I would be a sickly kid. That's why when I was in Congress, I co-sponsored legislation to require paid sick leave so that women wouldn't be discriminated against. The Equal Rights Amendment must be passed.
Ms. Lawrence.
We have, one of the jobs I had when I worked for the federal government, I was the EO investigator. And under that, we dealt with the law when it comes to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And I just was in the Rotunda in Washington yesterday, where we celebrated 50 years of that being signed. We are now struggling in our country with providing rights for sexual orientation. That is something our country, I introduced it to my council for them to vote on sexual orientation to be added to our own local ordinance. We in this country must understand that individuals who choose someone to love should not be discriminated in any way. Also, there is a call, and at the rotunda with all of the individuals and the King's children there was a call to approve the Voting Rights Act and to get it enacted right away. But our Constitution is one of the best in the world. I've traveled abroad to other countries and looked and compared, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, and other places. And so it's not to change our Constitution, to amend and to bring it up to date so that we are actually ensuring that everyone is included. Thank you.
Burgess Foster?
Mr. Bledsoe, I thought it was a pretty tough question, and I tell you, I don't believe in being a sickle fan. It was a good question. I thought about it hard, and I've hoped that I would get a question like this. What I would do is a couple things. If I wanted to be really radical, I could say, let's make a unicameral legislation. Why would we do that? Because legislation would pass over to the president faster for signing. Instead of going through 2 chambers, you go through 1. Therefore, it gets to the president faster. But let's, pump the brakes a bit because we want to possibly issue an amendment they actually may have a chance of passing. So one thing I would fight for immediately is to change some language in Article 1, which governs the House of Representatives. And I would hope that we could have term limits in the House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate, the other legislative chamber. Because anytime someone can stay in office for 50 years, 60 years, be 90 years old, Thurman, the gentleman from South Carolina, stayed in office until I think he was Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond was 100 years old in the U.S. Senate from South Carolina. So we need to have, I was saying Thurman Thomas from the Buffalo Bills, but I had to think about that. I had football in my mind. But what we really need to do is to have term limits, though. All jokes aside, we need to really have term limits. And I believe anyone should be able to serve 18 to 24 years because obviously 6 can go into 18 and 24 evenly in both houses. One could serve either 12 terms and the other one could serve 4.
Thank you.
And then get them out of there.
Brian Dickerson for the next question.
Not only Mr. Hobbs.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Thank you very much. Mr. Hobbs.
Thank you. I would use the opportunity to have our Constitution reflect the diversity of today in our country. To have an opportunity to really move the needle on the pressing issues that we're dealing with as communities. So when we talk about women and pay equity, I've stood up for women every day in Lansing, making sure that we have women that are elected to office. Introducing and sponsoring the bill for the earned sick days, which helps 43% of the women, that are currently not able to earn sick days where they work. So making sure that we're addressing those issues, but also the LGBT community, and making sure that we're being respectful to everyone in our community. So I would want to use the Constitution to really address some of the most pressing issues that we have today. And then I cannot leave out protecting voters. I can't, we have to do a better job to ensure that we're protecting voters, here in this country.
Rebuttal?
Yes, Mr. Foster.
The gentleman from Southfield, as they say on C-SPAN, mentioned some issues that I thought were basically non-amendable. I mean, we had Shirley Chisholm fight for the Equal Rights Amendment in 1972 already. I think we just need to enforce the laws that are on the books. We already have the Equal Rights Amendment that tries to at least give women the same level playing field that men has. Shirley Chisholm was a big proponent for women's rights.
Thank you. Mr. Dickinson.
Okay, I think it's Mr. Foster's turn to start, so I'll start with you.
Can you bring your microphone? I'm sorry, can you bring your microphone a little closer? Thank you.
The United States has just received word that the territory of one of its strategic allies has been violated by perhaps another country, perhaps a stateless organization. How will you decide whether to support the use of American military force to reverse what's happened in that country?
You know, one thing I could tell you, Brian Dickerson, is that a lot of the questions that you all are bringing up, Nolan talks about them all the time in the newspaper. So if you just read the editorial page, you can already get a heads up.
Did you just say you were not a sycophant until the previous question?
No, I'm not. But I'm mentioning that you can have evidence-based information in the editorial page for Nolan Finley. You got to be sang for it. You got to be calm, cool, and collected. Don't let them rattle you. So what I was going to mention about this stateless form of government, some may call Palestine, you didn't drop any names, invading another area of a country, I would actually try to issue more diplomacy, finesse diplomacy more. I think it was Charles Sumner who said that war should not be the final arbiter of peace. And that a lot of times, even though things are conflictual, there are rockets launched, you know, one every other day, I think we need to have more diplomacy. And if it came to the need of a military might, I would hope that we would just be able to lend arms. I don't think any boots on the ground are necessary.
Thank you. Hanson Clark?
This issue is addressed in our Constitution with our separation of powers and balance of powers. The Constitution provides that only Congress can declare war and fund armed forces, yet gives the power to be commander-in-chief to the president. The War Powers Act was enacted by Congress to address some of these difficulties. But this situation is not abstract. This is exactly what we're dealing with in Iraq. So let me get to the point on this right now, is that ISIL, these are al-Qaeda offshoots that are so extreme that al-Qaeda doesn't want to do anything with them because they're so extreme. They pose a threat, not only to our one ally in the Middle East, Israel, but in terms of what the Iraqi ambassador to the U.S. said himself, is that this invasion by these extremists will now create 1,000 new bin Ladens that could pose a threat to the United States. I served on the Committee on Homeland Security. I'm acutely aware of the risk and threat of nuclear terrorism to our people here. This threat is real, and now with this instability in the Middle East, it could be imminent. So right now, I would urge the president, engage in diplomacy, but let's use what Ambassador Dennis Ross says, let's use smart diplomacy, diplomacy that leaves on the table the threat of military force. That's the best chance right now that we have of arriving at peace.
Rudy Hobbs?
Yeah, I think we have, you know, here in America, we have very little appetite at this point to send massive numbers of troops anywhere in the world, which really leaves us with the opportunity to use our influence around this world from a diplomatic standpoint, making sure that we're leading the conversations in places like Iraq. Now, I will always say that we need to make sure that everyone understands that if there was resources that were needed, whether it be training for our soldiers, whether it be advisors, an advisor's role, whether it be a military airstrike, I think those things have to stay on the table, absolutely. But at this time, where we're at, boots on the ground, I can't be supportive of that at this point, where we're at as a country, as a nation.
Rebuttal?
Let me let Brenda Lawrence speak, and then we'll get to the rebuttals. Brenda Lawrence.
Absolutely, in the United States of America, there should be a three-step approach. There should be diplomacy. Diplomacy should be exhausted. And then there's sanctions. And we as a country have used that effectively with those who support terrorists against us. And then last resort is military action. Now, I traveled and talked to the government of Saudi Arabia, of Turkey, of Israel. And these are Azerbaijan. These are countries in the Middle East who are our allies. And I was sent there as a mayor to have those conversations and increase our relationships. And they are very much allies of ours. And we have an obligation to keep our allies protected and stay connected to them. And that's why this whole outreach that we have of countries that come together and say that I've got your back and you have mine, because we are dealing with a common enemy. Absolutely not. I think history has taught us that losing lives, American lives, should be a last option, and there should be a path and a clear understanding of what victory is. I would not, at this time, vote as a congresswoman to put boots on the ground. I will strongly support diplomacy and sanctions at this time.
Burgess Foster.
Yes, the first African American to win a Nobel Peace Prize was from Detroit. His name is Ralph Bunche. He won that prize for de-escalating a little problem that we're still talking about today. I believe that there's a bit of a history lesson that the world needs to really understand. When we're talking about what's happening in the Middle East, we're talking about a situation that's been ongoing for, I don't know, maybe 3,000 years, since someone by the name of Abraham had a couple of kids, and there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
We do need to have someone go over there and bring that to a halt.
Nolan Finley.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, this is a curiously drawn district. It includes some of the poorest neighborhoods in our region and some of the richest. It includes people who depend greatly on government programs and people who pay a lot of money for those programs. In such a varied district, and with people coming from such different backgrounds and living in different conditions, how, as a congressman, as a representative, will you represent that district? How will you set your priorities? Let's start with Mayor Lawrence.
I'm proud to say that in my service, and I want to mention that even when it was discussed about a council form of government, I have that experience as well as also being the mayor of that city. But in that role and in my position of leadership and the experience I've got, I have a very diverse community. I have one of the largest business addresses. I have more international headquartered companies in my city than any other city. So Japanese companies. I have dealt with Korean companies, Korean cultural centers in my city. I have had the Filipino cultural centers in my city, the Chaldean communities chambers in my city. I have one of the largest Nigerian populations in that city. I have a large African American population. And so my day-to-day role is to take care of the needs of all of those communities. And when I walk in the room with these groups, it's not introducing myself, as some candidates have to do. They have to actually meet these individuals. I have formed those relationships and supported these communities. And you know, I just want to give you one example. When 9/11 hit, the Chaldean community called me and asked me to sit in the room with them, with the FBI and with the CIA, to say, Mayor, would you stand with us, because we feel like we're being profiled, and we have a lot of concerns about our family. And that is the kind of respect that I have in this community. I traveled to Israel on the request of the Jewish community to meet with leaders there. So I am primed and ready to represent this district.
Henson Clark.
You know, Nolan, you mentioned one thing about, you know, poor people relying or maybe needing government benefits. I have to clarify this, even though I'm using up my time on the district. Look, I'm from one of those families that grew up being covered under Medicaid because we were that poor, being fed with groceries that were purchased with food stamps. after my parents died, having to survive in school on Social Security at age 19, losing hope and losing everything, and then returning to food stamps as a young adult. Let me tell you something very clearly. You know what people need when they're in that situation? We don't need more benefits. We need business opportunities, because years ago, before we had those government benefits, the African American community owned businesses in Detroit on Mack Avenue, where I was born and raised. So one thing that we definitely need in this district, we are not divided. We may have income differences, but we are all unified on the need to create a better quality of life to attract businesses and families here. We all benefit from having an equally good school system that trains people based on skills that are actually in high demand. We also benefit when we cut student loan debt so that our graduates really have opportunity to spend money and invest and start businesses. We all benefit when we link each other with a regional transit system that gets the unemployed to the job so they now are working for a living. That attracts new businesses. And we also all benefit when we cut the government red tape on families and businesses by reducing onerous and unnecessary regulations. That's what I'm committed to if you return me to Congress.
Rudy Hobbs.
Yes, I feel like this district, like I embody this district. You know, I grew up on the east side of Detroit on 94 and Whittier. I taught school on the east side of Detroit. I cut my teeth in politics in Oakland County, starting on the Southfield School Board, you know, rising to be the #2 Democrat in the State House. So I feel like I embody this district. So when we're talking about bringing this district together, you bring this district together and move it as one region around issues. You root yourself in this community. You're visible in the community. You're accessible. You're talking to the people about what matters the most, and that's education. We want to have issues that we all can rally around as a 14th Congressional District. We want to talk about our, transforming our economy. That's mass transit. Mass transit does more than just connect the different communities throughout the 14th. It provides business opportunities. It provides jobs. And it also gives people an opportunity for jobs and workers' training. So those are the type of things that we have to be diligent about. These are the issues that we have to rally people around. And I should not forget crime and safety. Every community that I knock, and I've knocked over 32,000 doors in this district. Every community that I've knocked, those are the issues that matter the most. And that's what the congressman has to do. Rally people around the issues that unite us, not divide us.
Burgess Foster.
Nolan, can you repeat the question for clarity for me, please?
Yeah, just real quick, varied district, different economic conditions, neighborhood to neighborhood. How do you represent such a varied district, and how do you set your priorities?
Well, what I would do is I would become the chief cheerleader for the region. I would use my office in ways that have not been used. I mean, for example, I would go over to the east side of Detroit, bring Pershing and Osborne together, be right out there with them in the middle of the field there, either at Pershing or Osborne, talking to the parents about a need to transform their personal lives, using me as an example. When my grandmother came into my bedroom at 17 and told me that I could drop out and get a job and just help out with the bills, but I decided to stay in school. It was somewhat of what they call an awkward moment. But I can be a chief cheerleader. I can be a motivator to the single-parent moms, the re-entry dads, those who are in the prison system, who are separated from their children. The office of a congressman is, in the duties are related in Article 1 in terms of legislation. But what really needs to happen is someone needs to flip up the cuffs on their trousers, put on a short sleeve shirt, and go out there and start mingling with the people on the bus system. I'm probably the only person up here that can tell you that Route 23 is the Hamilton bus, the 16 is the Dexter. I bet a lot of the youth out there that you're talking about, Nolan, for mass transit probably understand what those routes are. To let them know that while they're working on trying to better themselves, they need to be engaged productively in their lives. There's no free lunches.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Tim Blesso, the next question.
Thank you. I suspect that all of you have spent quite a bit of time the last few months trying to raise enough money to run a successful campaign for Congress. My question is, given the fact that studies show that it requires hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps as much as $1 million, to run a successful campaign for Congress these days, is there something that we can do to rein in the influence of money in politics? Do people have to write too many IOUs in order to raise the money that they need to run a successful campaign? What about campaign finance reform? And this is for anyone.
Let's start with Hanson Clark.
You know what I'd like to do? I would like to paraphrase the scriptures. It's not money itself that's the evil. It's the love of money that's the problem. It's politicians' obsession with raising money. They believe that that's the only way that they can get their message out to win the elections. And yes, I've seen it firsthand. You and I, as citizens, we pay the price of a Congress that is not engaged at committee hearings. They have to go raise money. They may talk a good game about some of the issues that we need, like cutting our underwater mortgages and helping people get jobs, but I'll tell you this, they'll talk the game, but they won't actually work on anything that will alienate their big funders. So this is a problem. You know, the way to be able to get around the influence of money, though, quite frankly, and yes, I do support, you know, overturning some of these court decisions that say that corporations can spend unregulated amounts of money, but here's what we need to do. Folks like me, we need to go out and inspire people to vote. And we need to do that by addressing what people actually need. The reason why Congress has to raise all that money because they're out of touch with what we need. I introduced the Student Loan Forgiveness Act of 2012 because I realized that's the debt that families were struggling with, not this abstract budget deficit. And when I introduced that bill, I engaged the entire American people. I was able to get new voters, college graduates, 1 million more of them, to sign my petition urging Congress to adopt this legislation. This is how you win elections. Inspire people to vote. Forget about the cash.
Thank you. How about Burgess Foster?
Outstanding. The real conundrum is money. I differ with my colleague, the gentleman from Detroit to my right. Money is a big problem. Dark money. This eerie sounding things that I'm hearing on the news about dark money. Nobody knows where it comes from. It's anonymous. It just grows and comes out of nowhere. And it just bombards people with this rhetoric, this propaganda. It's all about message to me. See, that's the difference. The difference is it's either money or message. Some people say, well, I can craft my message better with money. I believe that you change the election finance laws by putting a cap on how much money can be spent. I've mentioned this in some of my responses in public forums, that I think there should be a serious cap, and it shouldn't even be even $100,000. It should not be. As a matter of fact, I believe that the message is so critical and vital to more than money, that every time that an individual wants to do an ad on TV or put something on the side of a bus, that the individual who has the least amount of money, that probably would be me up here, should be able to be given equal opportunity for the same amount of message space.
Thank you. Brenda Lawrence?
Yes. In America, we are now talking about billion-dollar presidential campaigns. This is totally out of control. There should be a limit on campaign fundraising, and I do support that. However, I'm proud of the fact that I have made personal calls, and the majority of my money, 80% of it, has come from individuals who support me, individuals who said that I support you and want you to serve in Congress. And I've out-fundraised all of the people that are sitting here since I've been in this election. And that comes from the people who support you. And that's what campaigning and fundraising should be about. It should be about the voters wanting to support you to get elected.
Rebuttal.
Should there be Should there be a cap? Absolutely. Because right now with the laws that's been passed, it is out of control. When is there enough? When is there enough? In the presidential election, we're gearing up already. We started seeing ads on the governor's race last year. So it is time for us to look at that, and I would absolutely, as your Congresswoman, be very proud to introduce that onto the floor of Congress.
Rudy Hobbs.
Yeah, I think the courts went too far in terms of removing limits and caps on corporations. I believe that we should have caps and limits. It does cost money to communicate with voters, absolutely. And I think that candidates should be given an opportunity to raise money, but in a responsible way. And we have to make sure that we have transparency. Everyone should be able to look at a campaign finance report and see where your money is coming from. If there's a piece of literature that hits your door, you should be able to read the fine print and know exactly who those individuals are. We shouldn't have dollars that are in campaigns where we don't know what the interest are. We don't know, who's putting up the dollars. Transparency is absolutely critical in the process of raising money in campaign finance reports.
Thank you. I think we have two rebuttals. Burgess Foster.
I think everyone's probably seen the movie Campaign with Will Ferrell. Everybody has? Okay. There ought to be a sequel written, and here is the storyline. Will Ferrell challenges his opponent to run, but not raise any money. Who can get the message out to the people without $1 being spent? Just talking to people, knocking on doors, going up to schools, volunteering, talking to people, going to public forums. Then you will see who is really a message leader or a money conduit.
Thank
who
you.
owes favors to people.
Hanson Clark.
Even though I have experience in Congress, I believe we've got to change the system. It's all backward. It's not about who supports the politician. It's about the elected official serving the public. That's why we have a government. So the question is, who does the elected official, who does the candidate support, and how will they best support? I want to be able to brag one day about how well families and businesses are thriving here in Metro Detroit, not to boast on who's supporting me. It's got to change. That's why I really need to get back in Congress so I can help change the system and actually speak for us, not the politicians.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so that will be the last question. I thank you, candidates. At this time, we will now go to our 1-minute closing statements that will be in the reverse order of the opening statements. Therefore, we will begin with U.S. House of Representatives District 14 candidate Burgess Foster. Mr. Foster.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is imperative that you do not vote for name recognition. According to the Wall Street Journal and Harris poll, nearly 70% of all Americans want to see someone new elected into office. I am the new guy. I am the change guy. I am an individual who totally understands my district. I'm in touch with the people. I'm in tune with them. I believe in individual responsibility. I'm not a dogmatic Democrat. I need for each of you on August the 5th to go back to your neighborhoods and let them know that Burgess D. Foster says without any money, he's willing to go out on the sidewalks, in the driveways, and have dialogues at the curbside and talk to people about why they should vote. And once I do win in the primary, I hope that I will, I'm going to use my office to go and help out individuals who are in tight districts in other areas so that we can have a cohesive message going to Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
I'm ready to teach the Republicans a lesson.
Next, we will have Hanson Clark. Mr. Clark.
I've served in Congress. I know how to get things done. And if you return me to Congress, I'll be able to hit the ground running on day one. I also have the dedication to serve us. I've worked effectively to help people save their homes, get jobs, clean up our water, start the bridge of a new transportation system, improve how we educate and train our people to get hired into new jobs. And the reason why is because I believe it's in our destiny to live better lives. In fact, the Declaration of Independence states it, that we all have the right to life, to liberty, to most importantly, though, we have the right to pursue happiness. And these are the democratic virtues that I will embrace and that I will represent if you return me to Congress to serve as your next U.S. representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Next, we'll have Rudy Hobbs. Mr. Hobbs.
Ladies and gentlemen, over the last year, we've seen 4 members of the congressional delegation announce their retirements, and with them go 133 years of political clout and experience. Now is the time for us to send a young, energetic leader with fresh ideas to work on our behalf in Washington, D.C. I'm very proud of my campaign. Our campaign has brought, all sectors of this district together, from the Levins to the Dingles, from the UAW to the Detroit Regional Chamber, from the black slate to the Jewish leaders. We have even been endorsed by 5 of the 7 city council members, in the city of Southfield. We have been working very hard. We are the campaign that will bring this district together. We are 75 miles long, 18 different communities. We are 2 counties, but we must move as one region, and I am the congressperson. I am the candidate to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Next, we will hear from Brenda Lawrence. Ms. Lawrence.
August 5th is Election Day, and it's an opportunity for us to send someone to Congress. And experience does matter. Experience of someone who's actually had hand-on experience where the rubber hits the road. I'm excited about this opportunity. And I've gotten the endorsement of the mayors and the council people throughout this district, the ones that are actually putting their trust in me. Look at my record. Have I been accountable? Have I produced results? This is an opportunity for us to look at the pool of people who are running and say, who can I count on based on what they have done, not what they're saying? And it's time for us to have a leader that will come back home and take care of this district. I want your vote. I humbly ask for it. August the 5th, Brenda Lawrence. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. Nolan Finley, Brian, all right, we can give him applause. Nolan Finley, Brian Dickerson, Tim Bledsoe, your questions were right on target, yes, thought-provoking. Let's acknowledge our wonderful panel, ladies and gentlemen. Our appreciation also and our thanks go to Jay Seawald, Ken Falk from Oakland Community College for providing tonight's outstanding venue, as well as from Dave Scott and his team of Katie and Dan from Civic Center TV for taping this event. Tonight's forum will be rebroadcast several times before the election on cable as well as municipal stations throughout the 14th Congressional District. You can contact your local cable provider for the dates and the times of the showing. This information will also be on the League of Women Voters website, and I did have a little correction about that. I guess all races in the voter guide for all races are on the vote411.org website. I have an additional announcement for the people here tonight and listening at home. State Senate District 11, which includes Farmington Hills, Southfield, Oak Park, and Lathrop Village, will be holding a forum in the Southfield Library on July 2nd, 7 p.m. State Senate District 11, Wednesday, July 2nd, 7 p.m., Southfield Library. Additionally, for state representative of the 35th District, that's Southfield Lathrop Village, we will also be holding a forum, again, at the Southfield Library on Wednesday, July 23rd at 7 p.m. These events and all of our events are posted on the League of Women Voters website, lwv.org. So, on behalf of myself, Carla Brisbois-Gribbs, tonight's coordinator, Judy Bateman, Ann Edwards, all of the volunteers that it took to put on this League of Women Voters Oakland area and Grosse Pointe event. We thank you for coming. Remember, vote on Tuesday, August 5th. Good night.